Montaigne is an accomplished and eclectic musician, songwriter and producer. Their work spans pop music, theatre and video games. Montaigne sidestepped a potential career as a professional footballer when their parents uploaded a song to Triple J Unearthed back in 2012. This led eventually to management and recording deals. Montaigne built widespread radio support, toured Australia a lot, and even won an ARIA in 2016. Since then, they've represented Australia at the Eurovision Song Contest. They've collaborated with David Byrne, Hilltop Hoods, and many others. Recently, they were even nominated for a Grammy alongside Austin Wintory and Tripod for their work on Australian video game Stray Gods. Montaigne is iconic. Montaigne is a role model, a humble but outspoken advocate across a wide range of issues. And in the past year, they've broken long-term management and label deals to commence a new era of being 100% independent and self-managed. What is that transition actually like? And over 10 years into a full-time music career, what is it that motivates Montaigne to keep going? Why make music? This conversation was recorded in October 2024. This podcast is made on Wurundjeri land. That's where I live and work, and I acknowledge the Wurundjeri people as this land's traditional owners and custodians. Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. I've just hit record. I don't know if you want to just go for it or...
We can just go straight for it.
Okay. Why not?
Yeah.
I feel like we bump into each other but have not really ever had the chance to sit and chat.
Yeah, I think because it's always like an industry thing and we're always being pulled to and fro.
Yeah. And I often at industry things don't, like I'm not really functioning as a human being.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. Me too. Yeah.
And I've interviewed you multiple times, I think, for Double J.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least once, yeah.
Yeah. Well, hi, I'm Tim. I'm just a guy.
Hey, I'm Jess. I'm just a guy as well.
Nice one, Jess.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. Although I saw you've just launched a podcast too. I've just been listening to your Ben Lee episode.
Oh, cute. Yeah, I have just launched a podcast. It's a lot of effort and they don't tell you that. Or rather, it's like, well, no, it is a lot of effort. I think it would feel like less effort if I just did things in a timely and organized fashion. But I decided instead to like edit the episode the day before release and all the clips and stuff. And that's how I live. And
I've been wanting to do this podcast for a long time, and then for a while I told myself like, no, I'm not allowed because it's like cliched for a radio host to do a podcast, and then I got over that, and then I was like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to make sure that like I'm not going to announce it until I've recorded like 10 of them.
Yeah,
you know,
that's similar to how I've done it. Yeah,
but I actually didn't do that.
Oh, you did? You're right.
I did the other way around. I announced it so that I would do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to get a bit of that buffer. Like I've got a few up the sleeve now.
Nice.
But there's still some weeks where it's just like turn it around and bash it out. But are you enjoying it though, having these kinds of conversations?
I really am. It's very comforting. I think you kind of find that people are enduring the same struggles. Everyone's sort of just overcoming them in different ways, I suppose. Yeah. And it's interesting to hear about all the different ways that people do operate and compose and construct their careers and their creative practices. Because everyone's so different. So
yeah. And we might have something in common here in that I don't think I could have started this podcast properly while still working at the ABC.
Right.
Just because, you know, it just felt like there were things I wasn't allowed to comment on, which is broadly speaking the ABC itself.
Yes.
But, you know, not having that as a layer in my head has kind of freed me up to go into these conversations with there's no barriers up.
No
I'm happy
filter.
to talk about it in any way. And do you feel sort of similarly? Because you've sort of unhooked yourself from label and management stuff in the last 12 months, right?
Yeah, I do feel similarly. The label never said to me you can or can't talk about anything in any given way, but there are implicit expectations and I guess biases and stuff that exist there, you know, like it's hard. Well, not even just like expectations from the label, but even the optics of being signed to a major and then saying, I think majors kind of suck, you know, like that there's a bit of a hypocrisy there. I don't think the hypocrisy is, I think being at a major label and having that critique is actually extremely valid because you have firsthand experience with that organization and you know how it works and you get to actually say how it feels to be a part of it, you know. But it was kind of like at some point if you have things to continue complaining about and they don't change and in fact you discover that's just part of the systemic structure of the organization, at some point you kind of just have to jump ship and say maybe this isn't for me, you know? Yeah. Well, we might get into some of that stuff depending on how well we establish our rapport now that we're having a real conversation. But if I start asking you, like, tell me, what does it really feel like about what are major labels really like? Then you can start asking me what Triple J is really like, if you like. Yeah, excellent.
I'm
curious.
No one's asking
fantastic. Okay, interesting.
This podcast is called Why Make Music, right?
Yes.
So often we start by doing a bit of an origin story, which is basically to say like you have reasons for making music now as like grown-up Montaigne, but as baby Jess, do you remember your first, like what are your earliest memories of music, even just as a kid in the house? What's the vibe there?
Yeah, well, firstly, I think music is pretty innate to me. I was always interested in singing and I always really loved music and I also started composing my own melodies from a very, very young age. I remember being in the backseat of the car and my parents had like a little tape recorder or something like that. And me and my sister, who again were like 5 and 3 or something like that, were just like humming along and singing our own little melodies that we were making up. So very much interested and involved and engaged with music from a young age. My parents weren't really musical, but they were thrilled that we were. I started learning the guitar when I was 12. Actually, before even that, I was doing like choir and trumpet and stuff when I was in primary school, like year 3. So 9 years old. I picked up the trumpet and I was part of the school band and stuff. I didn't love doing the trumpet because I was the only non-boy in the thing and it was it had a weight, it felt in a certain way. And
the horn section is often full of dudes, isn't it? Or at least it used to be, more so.
I think there are like gendered connotations to the brass instruments. I think maybe because they're very robust, full-bodied, heavy, loud, like it's not a particularly feminine group of instruments, so to speak. But so I think that was kind of my experience with that. But, you know, I was very involved in music. And again, I was singing in the choirs and stuff. And I continued to do so in high school. And I picked up the guitar when I was in high school. I did piano lessons as well, but I did not enjoy them.
Right.
I think I've, you know, also come to realize like playing instruments isn't something I'm actually very interested in. I like using them. I like how they sound. I like that other people are very good at them, but I don't really care to like hone that skill for myself really. But so yeah, as a kid really tried, but ultimately found that I only wanted to play instruments so that I could write songs. Basically, like I learnt them insofar as I could put chords together and write lyrics. So yeah, I think, you know, also I had a strong drive to write and to create. And part of that, again, I think comes from that innate quality. But I think also, you know, I had a kind of challenging upbringing. And I think sometimes music was a way for me to process the way I was feeling and to also find agency in that space because I didn't have a lot. And I mean, no child ever really does. Like they're kind of figuring themselves out and they have guardians or parents and someone looking after them and telling them like, here's how to live. But I think I had especially less than the average child agency and like ability to be freely and unjudgmentally independent and individual. So
those first songs you were writing, were you explicitly as a kid writing songs about your experience, or was it more just that the act of writing a song, even though it might have been about something completely different, it was just the act of doing it was something you could own and just that it could be yours?
I think initially it was just the act. Like I think when I was really little, I started writing songs. So it was just like writing love songs about
always
having crushes or fantasies of romance or whatever, like nothing real. Like I didn't have any relationships or romance or anything when I was in school, like either high school or primary. Like I had crushes on people, but nothing ever reciprocated. I was like never someone's girlfriend boyfriend situation, you know what I mean? So I very much was imagining things and, you know, read a lot and I'd write songs about characters and stuff. But then when I was, I guess, 15 or 16, that's when I sort of started to write more about my feelings and my experience and becoming more aware of those things. And, you know, I wrote like my song I'm a Fantastic Wreck, I think when I was like 16 or 17. So, yeah.
And who were gee, that's an amazing song too for a teenager. Holy crap.
Thank you.
So did you have like songwriters that were your heroes at the time? Like were there a couple of people that kind of ushered you in that you loved?
I think so. There was quite a few. I think my taste has always been very varied. It very much started with pop music. I think to begin with, only listened to pop music and heard whatever my parents sort of played. So that was like 80s and 90s, so like pop and hip hop and some rock, like Queen in terms of rock and stuff. And then, you know, I grew up listening to like Delta Goodrem and Kelly Clarkson and not Delta Goodrem, I already said that.
You listened to her twice.
Yeah, like Avril Lavigne and like, you know, all those sort of female pop singers I really emulated and grew up with and really loved that music. And then when I was a teenager and like YouTube kind of came about, I was able to explore more and I found a lot of different artists who weren't like played on Australian radio, and that ranged from like pretty obscure to less obscure. And I would say my most influential like songwriters at the time were probably Feist and Regina Spektor and Fiona Apple and, you know, sort of the really acrobatically voiced, you know, female singer-songwriters sort of thing. And, you know, I even really liked like Bright Eyes, like Conor Oberst and Bright Eyes and stuff because it, you know, it really spoke to my emo soul. Yeah, I really loved My Chemical Romance and I had a big like emo scene phase. I was listening to like, like Panic at the Disco and Chiodos and Paramore and like that whole sort of Fueled by Rum and sort of thing. Yeah, I went through a lot of different eras of music taste but I do think my personal songwriting was most influenced by like those very songwritery acts. Coldplay as well, I would say, like early Coldplay. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Amazing. I love you mentioned Leslie Feist in there too, like just like low key, wildly influential artist.
She's one of the best. She's one of the best. Like it's undeniable.
Often gets like is the top of the list when one of your favourite songwriters or musicians starts talking about what they love. Yeah. Feist is always in the mix, but I love that. So, okay, great. So you try learning a few instruments. You are possessed of a pretty singular voice I will also say, and I'm not going to spend this whole time blowing smoke up your bottom, but you know your voice is not like everyone's. I can't do what you do with your voice. When did you have a moment of discovering that where you were like, oh, this actually doing this with my voice comes really naturally and I seem to be in tune most of the time? Like, was there a moment where you were like, was it in choir potentially during school where you were like, I seem to be able to nail this without having to worry too much about it?
I don't know if I had like a eureka moment, so to speak. I think, it was just always like a natural comfort and confidence, I guess. There were times of a lack of confidence. I think because my voice didn't sound like other people's voices, I was like, is this even a good voice? You know?
Yeah, okay. Were there times where like it felt like people were trying to like put you into a, like even in school, for example, in choir, where they were like trying to hem in some of the
I mean, I think that's a facet of choir, right? Is like the idea is to blend voices, and my voice did not blend. And also, honestly, I didn't really want to blend. Like I felt I liked to sing, and I thought I had a good voice, and I liked hearing my own voice. And so I definitely, you know, there were a lot of, I knew I was good at singing, and I really liked doing it, and I tried to find as many opportunities to perform at school as possible and stuff like that. But it was, you know, the biggest, honestly, obstacle for me with high school and music was that I didn't take it as a subject in year 11 and 12, and because of that, I wasn't entitled to the use of like the music department and its spaces the way everyone else was. And also, you know, priority was given to music students to like perform and stuff like that, which I get. But also, you know, the reason why I didn't do music as a subject was partly because I don't think my parents really wanted me to. My parents are like migrants, and they were more interested in me doing like extension 2 or 1 math and extension English and like, you know, all of the stuff that makes you like a doctor or a lawyer or like someone who makes a lot of money and works a really stable job. But so that was partly it. And then also, you know, it's pretty crazy because I went to a private school. My parents would pay for a private school, but we couldn't really afford like music tuition, which was required to do HSC music at my school, and it was like $1,000 a month or something, like done through the school or whatever. And my parents were like, "We're not fucking paying that."
Yeah,
like,
they're already stretching.
You know
to,
how to
get
do
you
music.
To
like, why do you need tuition or whatever? You know, like, well, not just that, but also, that financially, like, that's. Yeah, that really prices people out of doing music. Like, that's fucking insane. Though I guess that is like a sort of what's the word? I don't know, an analogy or like a symbol of like how music works also in the real world is like either you can afford already to keep doing it or you don't do it. You know,
yeah. Particularly once you get into your 30s and up, if you've interfaced with lots of different tiers, I guess, of music without wanting to really always think of it that way, but you know, you do get to a point where you realise that the ones who are still sticking it out are the ones who have a supportive partner or supportive parents, or they have intergenerational wealth.
Yeah.
They have all kinds of privilege piled up. Yeah. The amount of private school. And disclaimer, I also went to a private school. Like my parents stretched to get me into a private school, which they could probably only just afford.
Yeah.
And I've been the benefit of that and a good education, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, I've been involved in music for my whole adult life, and the only way I've been able to make it work is the fact that my partner, who I met in high school, is a GP. She's a doctor. She's always had a stable income because we like hooked up so insanely early. Yeah. She's supported me the whole time. And so it's not like I've been sort of like, I mean, I've been working and I've gotten paid and I've had jobs and stuff, but I simply could not have done any of it without that. So, and the more stories you hear about that, the more you realise that's the norm, you know, which is wild. But, okay, so going back to origin story, I want to fit in Unearthed High into the timeline, because you're in high school, you're writing songs, you're playing as much as you can at school, and then you apply for Unearthed High in 2012?
2012, yeah.
And so you're like 16, 17?
Turning 17, yeah.
Okay, so like you're 11, 12?
Year 11, yeah.
Year 11, okay, cool. So, yeah, how was that experience for you? Because you end up being one of the finalists.
Yeah.
Like, were you doing that just off your own bat, or did friends encourage you to?
My parents uploaded the song.
No way.
I didn't even know. I was not across it. I basically had recorded this music, and there's a story behind why the music was getting recorded as well. But And my parents were really excited by it, and they were like, my mom was uploading it to like YouTube and SoundCloud and everywhere that she possibly could, and Unearth High. And
Mum's on SoundCloud. That's a vibe.
yeah. And that's basically how it ended up happening. Like
right.
it was just on there, and then I got the call, and I was like, what the hell? Like, I didn't even listen to Triple J at the time. I was like a Glee kid. I was really into pop music and Glee, and that's sort of what I was doing. And then I was like, okay, what's this Triple J thing? And because, my family had never listened to Triple J. We were like commercial radio people, like, as if it's a tribe. But like and when I got the call, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, once I realized what it actually meant, it was very exciting and it was cool. Like people in my cohort at school were like, this is so cool. Like people who probably had seen me. I was never like unpopular at school. Like I wasn't uncool, but I wasn't cool either. Like I was very sort of just middle of the road. And it, that happening made, I guess, like students who did listen to Triple J be like, that's really cool, which was awesome. And then, it also allowed me to start playing gigs, basically. Like,
Okay.
Yeah, I remember I played a gig at like Kinsella, so I was like 16. It was just me and a guitarist, and I had to get escorted in and out because I wasn't legally allowed in the building. And so like I couldn't look at the bar, I couldn't like walk past it. I had to be, in and out with security, couldn't hang out or anything. So yeah, that was really great. I don't know. Triple J on Earth did give me my whole career. Like I wouldn't be doing music now if that didn't happen, basically. Yeah.
So, and is that because like people saw that and then contacted you or contacted your parents? Or?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. It was a bit of people contacting us and also my mum doing outreach. My mum, like, as soon as this music came to be, she was immediately like, I need everyone to hear this. Like, I need to figure out how to get this support. I need to figure out how to get people to hear it. And so, when the song ended up on radio because of Unearth High, obviously people were interested and labels started emailing and stuff. But then also, even probably before that, my mum was emailing studios and publishers because she wanted the studio that we had initially recorded the music at had shut down because the guy had just decided to like move country or something like that. And she was like, okay, well, we need a new place to do this. Again, her not understanding how it works at all. Like she was on Google. She was researching. She was figuring it all out on the fly. And just like, she's very unafraid of like getting in contact with people. So yeah, that's how we got in contact with Albert's Music, who are no longer in existence anymore. BMG bought them. But at the time it was Albert's, and my mum was contacting just to like have studio space and see how much it was and all that stuff. And then they were interested in me because I was writing songs and I was a baby. So I ended up signing a publishing deal with them, 16, in my school uniform. Before the Unearth, or maybe it might have been after Unearth, but the conversation had started before Unearth.
Right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and
so your mum was sending it out everywhere she could, and people were getting back to you before and after Unearth, kind of, or getting back to your mum, going like, "This song's pretty cool. What can we?"
Yeah,
okay.
Precisely. And so Unearth though did. I don't know. It was interesting. Yeah, the labels and stuff were interested. Nothing came to fruition or be though, because I was really interested in just like finishing high school, and also like my honestly, I can't really remember the timeline of things. I remember just like a bit of jockeying happening and me wanting to finish school, and also really me personally not feeling ready to like be an adult and like have an adult career and all that stuff. Like I was very much a kid, and I was not a kid who knew much about the world. Like I just didn't, like I didn't encounter grown-ups except for my teachers and my parents much growing up. Like my parents didn't have many friends that we saw, and when we did see them, we were younger, and then we didn't see them anymore. It was just like very like, we were pretty isolated, I would say, as a family. And so like suddenly being thrust into this situation where there are all these like new people and they all have been doing it for decades, if not, basically. And, because I was with the publisher, then I started doing like songwriting sessions with people and stuff. And that was so scary. Like I was really, I had imposter syndrome and, rightfully so, because I was fucking 16. It was really scary, but it was cool. It was with cool people though. It was like with Andy Bull and Neil Sutherland and I'm trying to think who else I ended up writing with, but like, people I still sort of know now and have played with and all that stuff. And
yeah. And that's still sort of pre-Montaigne, is it? Just like at the end of high school?
Yeah. I was just Jessica Serra, I think, when I was really seeing like the Unearthed High music. I became Montaigne though when I finished high school because I was interested in a mononym. Like I didn't want to be Jessica Serra. I didn't think that was particularly interesting. And I'm, interested in like fantasy and world building and storytelling and stuff. So,
Just before we move on, I want to ask you one more about Unearthed. I know it was a long time ago.
No, please. Yeah.
But that program is still running to this day. Yeah. And I don't know if you would have crossed paths with so many of the finalists and winners of that particular Unearthed High program now over the years. Like I'm not going to name names, but like there are some artists who have gone through that process of being, a finalist, a high school student that gets plucked out by Triple J, broadcast on the radio, the labels and publishers all come out of the woodwork, the managers all get in touch. There are some artists who have gone through that process and it's not been a healthy thing for them. It's been a thing that they've had to processing a lot of tricky stuff at a very early age, and it's affected their relationship with music. Now, you've always just struck me as like, you are a very resilient person, right? Like that's come through so often in your interviews and just the way you work, which is a wonderful thing. But is it something you found yourself talking to other artists about? Like, does that ring true to you when I say that about even specifically Unearthed High as a program?
I can't say I've talked to like a lot of Unearthed. I think the people from Unearthed that I've been closest to are like Gab Strom, who is Japanese Wallpaper, and maybe Greta Ray, though I haven't spoken to her heaps in the last few years. But I don't know. I guess you just get the sense from all artists who start really young in this industry. It's like they are really excited because they want to do music as a career, and the opportunity, which is incredibly rare, presents itself to them. So of course you take it, but you don't understand the contract that is being given to you or what it means in the long term, because you literally don't know what 10 years feels like in that sense, or what recouping and then you're only getting 20% of all the royalties that you earn sort of means and stuff. I think, my personal experience was like, I signed contracts really young and they are affecting me now because, for example, my licensing deal with Sony Wonderlic has a sunset clause of 12 years. Like now if I wanted to go, I don't want to go to another label, but I did pursue this line of exploration and I, went to other labels and I was like, I would like to maybe get signed. And they would be like, okay, is your catalog available? And I was like, no. And it won't be for 12 years. And they were like, okay, well, goodbye, basically, like that's.
So just to be clear, the sunset clause is it's 12 years past termination of your contract.
Yeah.
They just get to hold on to it for another 12 years.
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah.
And which, like I get it. It's business. Like it's how business works. But I don't know that when I'm 18 and my mum's handling the contract, and my mum also doesn't know anything about the industry or how it works.
And even if you learn, there's still a case to be made that if depending on who's in your ear and what conversations are happening, you can be convinced that that's the right thing to do at the time. And there
Precisely.
there'd be a handful of people, maybe not heaps, but who would sit in this context and go, that was the right thing for them, or
Well, this is the thing, right? Is like I definitely wouldn't have the career now I have if I didn't sign that contract and do all that stuff, because my family isn't rich. Like they're not. We struggle with money, and like my you know, I mentioned I went to a private school, and like after I finished school, like I didn't know this when I was at school, but my mom was barely paying the bills for me to stay at that school. Like I don't know how she was, because I don't know whether to say this on podcast. I'm just going to tell you, and then if I feel like it needs to be edited out, we can get edited out.
That's very doable.
My mum billed me $17,000 to finish paying off my schooling, and I paid it because I just wanted to get her off my back because I had the money at the time.
That's awesome. I mean, that's wild, and great that you did it.
Yeah,
you know,
I did it because I was like, my mum used money to control me. Like she, even though it wasn't my thing to pay, she sent me to that school, and I didn't make that choice. Like it was, you know, the whole thing was, well, you got your education, I sheltered you, I clothed you, and now I need $17,000 to finish paying off the debt from your school fees. And I was like, I don't want to pay this, but I'm going to, because then I have no obligations to you anymore. Like there's nothing holding that over my head anymore.
Yeah.
So I did it. So that illustrates like where my family is at financially, at financially. And so I needed to sign with Sony because I needed someone to pay for me to make an album. Like I literally had no money, and I did not have the skill or the gear or the means of production to like be making my own music. So that was really handy for me at the time, and it came with trade-offs.
What were the trade-offs?
Well, the trade-offs were, like I get, I think, less than or about 20% of my, you know, sales for my music, and Sony gets 80%, and then obviously you have to recoup it, and then there's the, you know, that was like, I think it was one compulsory or mandatory album, and the rest, it was like 3 options on the rest of the contract, and and then the sunset clause basically. And because of also my naivety and greenness when I was 18 and starting to make records, like I didn't understand like how much money it took to make a record or how much marketing costs or whatever. And because none of the numbers were being shown to me whenever I was making a purchase or like paying producer fees or studio fees or mixing, mastering, whatever, I didn't know how much that was. And I was just like, whatever, you know, when in 2018, I went on a big like US, UK trip to make music with like all these really cool people. And I was just like, well, it just happens. Like it just is something that I say I want to do, and then it happens, and I don't have to think about the money. But ultimately that ends up being an amount that I have to recoup, and I still haven't earned a single cent from my streaming or my sales or whatever because I haven't recouped yet. And I've got I've got like $60,000 left to recoup or something like that, you know, and streaming doesn't pay fucking shit. So yeah, all that stuff. I just think like, I think especially when you're young and you don't know how it works, that's the issue, right? It's just that you don't know how it works. It is an unjust system, but capitalism is an unjust system, and that's the way that we are employed and employ and do all that stuff. So it's like not necessarily that they're doing anything particularly wrong, because within the system it makes sense, right? It's just that when you are that age, you don't understand what it actually means to like sign up to all those contracts and like be given money that eventually has to get given back, you know, like, I think luckily for me, I signed a really small contract, and it was a licensing deal, not like a 360 recording deal or anything. So like I will get to own my masters in like 10 years, which is good. More than can be said for some people. Some people will never own their masters, you know. And also some people get advanced literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions. It doesn't really happen anymore. But back in the day, you know, someone might get advanced like $1 million and they're like 16. They're like, wow, that's just like $1 million that I have. And they're irresponsible with money. They don't know what they're doing. So they go and buy a car and a house and shit or whatever. And then at some point they're like, wow, well, now I have to pay that back. And they don't realize that at the time, right? And for me, my upfront advance was $10,000. And I bought a laptop and a guitar. And like, that's, you know, I can recoup that because it's $10,000. But yeah, I feel sorry for people who've had to endure that. And I've heard from people who have had to sort of face that. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope things have changed a bit, like not even necessarily in terms of how deals are structured, but just in terms of like awareness around it. I feel like artists have become a lot more kind of educated and transparent about what deals are done, especially when they're dealing with the bigger end of town, the majors and the big publishers and stuff. Like artists have talked to each other now a lot more maybe than they did back then. I'm not sure.
I think so. Also just the internet, like
yeah, it's all out there.
It's funny. Like I've got Threads. I've downloaded Threads, and I really post very rarely because I just don't know what to say. But all of my like For You algorithm on Threads are just people talking about the industry basically, and I find that really interesting. It's like if you do want to know that info, you can have it delivered straight to your feed, like, I have stories about people's experiences. You can have it delivered straight to your feed and know about it, right? Where like even, 10 years ago with the internet, you'd have to go digging into like forums or Reddit or whatever, like where now it's actually just like if you're curious about this information and you like one or two things that are about this topic, it just like they send it to you. So it is in some ways easier, but then also like the landscape has completely changed as well. So in many ways, it's also much harder.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to put on my like, tinfoil hat, like crazy radical person persona here, but back in the day, artists would be exploited by bad deals from major record labels, and like that's kind of a narrative of artist exploitation from back in the day. Whereas now it feels like artist exploitation kind of covers all ground. Like it doesn't matter where you are in the chain, you're getting exploited in some way. I think when I had my music distributed through AWOL, which is like artists without a label, it's a digital distributor. I kind of liked them. Part of the reason why I liked them was because they were independent. Yeah. They got bought by Sony, and it was just like this wake up moment for me. And I was like, okay, so I'm independent by choice, but also because like no big labels ever knocked on my door and said, Tim Shiel, we want you, come in. Yeah, but I was just like, it was a moment for me of going, oh shit. And then like going around, like looking at other digital distributors and realizing just how many of them had been bought up by the majors. And it was just like, oh cool. So they've worked their way around to take a slice of everybody. Like I'm not a big major label artist, and I'm still kind of having some amount of my money siphoned off to these big companies too. It was just really weird.
I saw Lupa J even, who is distributed independently, so to speak, and when Universal took all their music off TikTok, their music was taken off TikTok, and they were like, what the fuck?
It's like I didn't realize I was in that. It's just because
Universal owned their distributor, and it's like, it's stupid. I mean, I'm now with Believe. I don't think... I think they're completely independent.
They're still a multinational for-profit company.
No, for sure. But, they all are. But thankfully it's pretty independent. I do, it's just, again, it's the natural like progression for capitalism for the big companies to start eating all the small companies so that they can grow even larger. And eventually it's got to collapse at some point, because at some point you run out of prey to feed on, and also humanity starts to descend. Like workers start to walk out and strike and resist, and and I'm curious to see how soon or not that happens in the next decade or so or whatever. But it is just like I feel like, I don't know, you can kind of say this forever, but I feel like we are kind of at like the pointy end of the timeline in regards to basically everything, but I think especially the music industry. And I think especially now with the introduction of AI, it'll be curious to see what happens with that. I feel like people aren't going to entirely adopt it readily, because I do think people actually care about like a human being being behind the art that they're consuming and stuff. And you can tell when something is made you can tell when the important bits of like a work of art are being produced by AI and it's bad, But I don't know. It's like almost impossible to be a business owning artist nowadays. I think it's just
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
comes up, even though I've only been doing this for a couple of months, it often returns to this idea, because this is essentially why I started the podcast, is because we are at the pointy end of a lot of things, as you say, you know, and climate is chief amongst them from many perspectives. And that the timing of that aligning with this kind of like, there's this idea that artists really have not a lot to lose now. Like the machinations of industry in terms of music have become so transparent and so precarious that a lot of artists, they now are entering into a life in music, or a musical life, sort of understanding that they don't have access to generating money or generating an income or buying a house from their music or anything like that. And that we're in this weird, like, I like this idea, although I'm not sure it's entirely true, if it's just wishful thinking, but I like this idea that there's like a generation of artists coming through that want to make a positive impact in the world, and they're going to align their creative practice with that more so than with the need to pay their bills. So that might mean they have a day job, but it means that their creative practice gets funneled into this kind of like world-changing energy or something. Like,
I
it
hope
might
so.
be naive,
Yeah.
but
I mean, no, I think that definitely exists. I think, it exists. It exists in the probably exact same amount that there exist people who feel even more so like, no, I'll be the one who cuts through. You know what I mean? Like, I think that happens in equal measure. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I do hope that the world. I don't know. It's hard.
any
it's
sentence
hard,
that
right?
starts with "I hope the world."
I hope the
is
world.
going
I do
in a
hope
good
the
direction.
world. Full stop. No, I wonder if we will be able to, I guess, build a better future. You know what I mean? And some way, I know there are obviously small collectives and communities and organizations that do that work, but I wonder if ever on a macro scale we'll be able to actually align ourselves with like a sustainable practice for the future, you know, just because I think there are too many like massive interests and power structures, you know, between governments and corporations that want things to be a certain way, a way that is destructive, and to like actually have it come from there, you know what I mean? Like it needs to sort of start from the bottom up, but I'm wondering, anyway, it's somewhat digressive.
No, not at all. And that kind of like, I hope it can change, but not really sure if it can, is the sort of like, that is the exact moment I think a lot of people are in right now, where we want to really hope for a positive future, but we sort of, it's starting to look a bit shaky, in that image in the horizon of things being better. It's hard, hey? You know, I think there's something that comes up a bit maybe in just some of the stuff I'm reading, is like the moment we're in with industrialization, capitalism, is like a blip on the timeline of humanity, let alone the planet. And so even though it can feel so inevitable, like there's that quote, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism, which when that quote I think was initially put out there, it wasn't necessarily in the context of climate. It kind of means a whole new thing now. It kind of is easy to imagine the end of the world. But like people have internalized this way of living, and these systems feel so strong and inevitable, but actually they're so fragile and they're falling apart. And, you know, if anything, it's the very collapse that's happening that can kind of give us hope that these unhealthy structures are fallible and that they can be rebuilt and reformed and, you know, shoved aside. But yeah.
Agree.
Agree.
Yeah.
And,
I think it'll.
And we did it.
I think
end.
it'll get worse before it gets better.
It's feeling that way. Yeah.
Is my. I think the problem is that because these structures are now so, I guess, integral to the way that the world functions. Like, if any of them do collapse, like a lot of people are going to get hurt in the process. You know, like it'll be scary. I think it's going to get scary. Like it's already scary. Like what's happening in Gaza and shit. Like that's scary. That's really horrifying and fucked up. Like,
yeah.
And we're just watching it. and like we actually can't do anything about it. Like all of us are trying to appeal as best as we can to the people that have the power to do something about it, and like they're just not doing it. You know, it's like, and they themselves, you have to wonder, like, is there no conscience here, or is it that just the political will is too strong in the adverse direction? But
Yes, I agree. I was looking at yesterday. I just found some graph. I think there's a website called Our World in Data. I think it's a place to go for awesome graphs and infographics and stuff. And they had one on the rise of autocracy and the decline in democracy, which is obviously a conversation that's been happening a lot, particularly in the context of the US election. But it was interesting looking at it and seeing that there has been it's essentially like they've marked every country in the world on a grade from like pure autocracy down to like the best, like liberal democracies, you know, the best version of democracy that we might currently have. And there is, in the context of the whole 20th and 21st century, a strong incline of democracy growing, you know, and all of the different forms of autocratic governments sort of shrinking a bit. Yeah. And then about 10 years ago, the democracy part of the graph just starts going down, and the autocracies go back up. And it was a really stark. I mean, there's a lot more to it than just a graph, but it was really stark to just see it, just go like, oh, right, sure. And it's not just like the last couple of years, it's like the last 10 to 15 years globally 100%. Has been a shift away from democracy. And countries like India that are no longer qualify as democracies under this particular way of framing it. You're just like, my God, okay. So in terms of things getting worse before they get better, it's, oh, gee.
Well, you know, that's why we make music though, isn't it? To bring it back to the Charlie's podcast. Well, I mean, I guess that's the thing. Like, is this a new generation of artists going to be able to reconcile the creative pursuit with what feel like really intense, difficult things in the world, you know? And I'd like to think that in order to have change happen, we actually need to nurture artists and like empower them, because we need storytellers and we need people who are willing to, you know, a lot of music, not all music, but a lot of music is a kind of processing. It's a kind of a digesting emotion on behalf of other people, or providing people with like a way of digesting their own emotions. Well, music,
there's all these amazing functions of music in the world that we need in a crisis as much as any other time.
Yeah. Music and art was therapy before therapy existed, before like psychotherapy existed, right? It's like there's obviously, I think psychotherapy is more targeted. Like you can, you know, go yourself to someone and they can listen to the entire story of your life and pick out the details and whatever. But, you know, if you can't afford that, or before that existed, you'd listen to a song and you would say, this person understands how I'm feeling and has given me the tools to process how I'm feeling. And I'm grateful for that. And this means a lot to me, you know. And I think especially in traumatic and tragic times like these, like all of that becomes even more important, because in order for us to have the resilience and hope to keep surviving all of this and try to have the will to change all of it, you need that, you know, force to drive you, I think. Yeah, I think, you know, obviously a lot of like conservative right-wing people want to convince us all that music isn't an important aspect of culture, or even, I mean, you know, this is the thing, is like maybe they don't even care about the cultural aspect of it. They care about the financial, right? And of course, the rest of us know that life doesn't boil down to money. Money does not predate humanity. It's or many other things, you know, like it is just I don't know. I was listening to a podcast yesterday. Do you know On Being with Krista Tippett?
My favourite podcast.
It
is the direct inspiration for this podcast.
Awesome, yeah. I listened to a chat with Adrienne Marie Brown yesterday, which was really wonderful.
The best.
She works in like a thing called emergent strategy, and she sort of has a look at how nature works and what it does to balance itself or to solve problems, and wonders how that can be applied to the way that we solve our own problems. And I think that's a good way of framing our lives, because we are animals and we are things that live from and in nature. And money is not a part of that. But I think it is just the part of the disease of capitalism to make you think that is, I mean, of course, if we're talking about like material reality, it is important, right? Like, but I think spiritually it is not important. I think music is a really essential part of our spiritual reality, and making sure that we can stay on track as people, and also, connect and communicate with each other. It's not just right among like people like me and you that sharing music is important. There are people who literally can't speak, who maybe have a disability, an impairment or something, and music is so important to those people and can be an incredible tool for them for communication and connection and stuff like that, right? Like, there's so many ways to look at it and so many reasons why music is important, even in capitalism, like especially in capitalism.
Yeah. One of my first guests was Dr. Anita Collins, who's a music teacher and a neuroscience researcher. So her big thing is everyone should learn music because it makes you a better human. It teaches you all these wonderful skills. And so she's all about trying to improve the proliferation of music education in schools.
Yeah.
And we talked a bit about music predating language. Like, music is our first language. So actually biologically, neurologically, we respond even more deeply, intuitively to music than we do to language itself. And so that makes music an incredibly powerful and powerful tool for emotional regulation and for communication. And it's something that's been, that like core nature of music has been somewhat clouded, I think, by the short-lived boom of recorded music and artistry, capital A artistry, and all of the commercialization around it. But it can feel like really unrealistic to kind of try, or a bit like woo-woo to try and reclaim that, or try and hang back onto that idea of music as being this kind of deeply like ancient human practice. But when you actually think about the feelings you get when you listen to music, the tingle down the spine, or the being in a room with a bunch of other people, and that feeling of togetherness that can happen when you're, singing together or watching a performance, like, it is wildly, viscerally deep human experience.
Yeah. I mean, to provide a stupid example, like the difference between me crying or not crying at like a dog on TikTok is whether or not I have the video on mute or not. like literally I can watch a dog video and be like, oh, that's cute if it's on mute. But then if there's like a nice song play, or like a song, like a beautiful ambient track, I'm like, this really got me in my heart, like it's literally that simple, I just, I think it is just, it's so important. And anyone that tries to deny it, I literally don't have time for. Like, I just don't think they have anything worth saying if someone wants to try and say like music is just a frivolous thing, like that immediately marks you as an unserious person in my eyes.
Yeah. So there's a great blog post on your website posted New Year's Eve last year where you summarise a year in Montaigne, and you also talk a little bit about this decision to break up, so to speak, with your label and management. Long-term relationship, breaking up with anyone after 10 years is a huge deal. But you write really eloquently about what you hope to get out of it and why you're doing it, in terms of feeling freer to make decisions and feeling empowered. I'm just curious how it's going. Like, what is that? It's 9 months since you posted that. You've started putting some music out. Like, how is it feeling for you? I'm sure you're working harder and learning new things. Like, well, maybe not working harder, but like working on different things. Yeah. How is it all going?
It's going well. I think the main difference is just that I'm much busier because I'm having to perform more tasks now. Yeah. That's most of the difference in terms of like I don't know, just general career stuff, not having someone there to sort of like schedule my things and put things on my calendar and answer emails and set up, you know, the tool, connect people through email, like all that stuff, really like admin-y sort of stuff. I do all of that now, but I have help, a little bit of help. So that's been good. I think, you know, with releasing music, the biggest difference is probably just that you notice some privileges aren't there anymore. Like major labels, much as I think they are on the decline, and there are a lot of the ways that the industry is changing in a way that doesn't favor them, they do still hold some cultural power and some sway with like radio and playlisting and all that stuff, partly because they own stakes in like Spotify and streaming services and shit. So yeah, it's interesting. Like New Music Friday came out and I was added to that playlist, which was cool. But I was like 17th on the playlist, where previously I might have been in that like top 10 or even like top 5 sort of thing. And the other artists that were there were all signed to labels. So that's just that sort of stuff, right? Like it's really small, but it's like quality of life sort of stuff. You know what I mean? I think also even with radio, right? It might not actually make a qualitative difference with me because my last album wasn't supported by Triple J at all. And I think Triple J has also fundamentally changed in the last 10 years. Totally different to the station that gave me my career in 2014 or whatever. So, yeah, just that sort of stuff is like you see is not that feels different. I think also I think industry people are less interested in you when you're independent because there's nothing that they can gain from you. Like if I'm like, well, I'm self-managing and I'm self-publishing or like doing all that stuff, then they're like, okay, well, why would I talk to you? Because I'm not able to actually capitalize on your project in any way. I think that's a thing as well. On the other side of the coin, yeah, I'm free as a fucking bird and it feels great. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, and I can reach out to whoever I want without having to like float it with a committee or with people like, you know, trying to strategize for me or whatever. I'm very agile. Like if the scene does change and the industry changes and streaming changes, all that changes, like I can move very quickly to adapt, where like when I was with the label, it really felt like I couldn't. It really just slow moving beasts they are, you know, and my album came out in 2021 or 2021. It was making it. And like all the algorithms were changing and Triple J was like, it didn't seem like they were giving me the same interest as previously and all that stuff. And so I was like, well, why don't we pivot away from a Triple J based model and like try to do something creative and interesting and new? And it just like, they weren't ready for that. And I was like, well, I'm ready. Like let's just start doing stuff. But like no one, because everyone was used to a version of the industry that no longer existed, but they still wanted to try to flog that dead horse. And I was like, well, I've moved on from the horse. Let's find some new horses, you know, like, that's sort of, so now, I don't have that burden anymore, which is really nice. And I do feel really like, I think the other thing with me is that I like to do a lot of different things. And, you know, video game composition is part of my life now and it's something I've wanted to do for a while. And I sort of expressed interest and was pursuing possible leads on that when I was with my management label. But the moment like I got something, you know, had someone named Riley who was working on a project, really small project, self-funded basically, like the fee was going to be for me to do, I think 4 songs, 4 minutes long, like $4,000 total, which is like not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, right? But I was like, I don't care. I just want to do a job. Like I just want to like build my portfolio in this space. And my management and label were like, you can't do that because it's not enough money, basically. Right. And I was like, well, that's stupid.
It's dumb. Yeah, it's just dumb.
They were basically deciding like this isn't worth your time or ours because the amount of time it would take to do it isn't compensated well enough. And I was just like, well, in my mind, it is because this is experience. Like this is a foot in the door of like doing stuff in the industry. And like Riley doesn't have a huge budget. Like that's the point. He's an indie game maker, you know, anyway. So it was just like that kind of shit really pissed me off. And I was like, I can't do this anymore, especially because like I was doing game stuff and I was doing theater writing and composition, and I was getting involved. I was like, I got an acting job on TV for SBS doing like a musical comedy, and all that shit I got for me. And like the part that my management and label and stuff did was like talking contracts and doing the admin-y stuff. But like I could have done that as well very easily, you know, I was like, I can't. This doesn't work for me anymore because I want to do too many things that are not just recorded music and live touring, and they still get a cut from that stuff, even though I'm organizing that stuff myself and I have the contacts and like the network connections and all that stuff. And like, I know that I can just send the emails or like talk to my lawyer or whatever, you know, like that's easy. And I have enough like starting capital now because I've been doing this for 10 years to like not have to pay my management. Like I can just take that fee and then using the extra 25% that I'm not paying to my management, pay for a lawyer or pay for whoever needs to like do that stuff. And it wouldn't be the entire 25%. You know what I mean? It's like, so that's sort of where I got to, and that's why I ended up going indie, and it does feel way better because now, it just doesn't, I can actually like make interesting choices and not worry about like losing money because I have to give someone 25% of the thing that I was doing that they weren't working particularly hard on anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah. And also, I think speaking to other people who've been in a similar position, it's like all of a sudden the scale shifts down a little bit and things become a little bit more achievable and the pressure is a little bit off. Because you mentioned like you only see 20% of your royalties and you've got to recoup anyway. Whereas now I'm sure you're able to set it up in a way that, you know, you don't need nearly as many people listening in order for it to like quote unquote work.
Yeah.
Whereas otherwise you're in this system where if you're not like doing these giant numbers, then it kind of doesn't make sense on their spreadsheet. And so then you're not a priority. And it's just like, I think you've made a good call. I think you're in a good spot.
Yeah. I also just knew that I would never do big numbers. Like I know previously in my career I've done big-ish numbers. Like I think Because I Love You has about 20 million plays or whatever. But even then, like 20 million, the eyes of a label, unless you're doing that every single song that you put out, is not a lot. And like they want you to be in the billions or they want you to be in the as high as you can go, basically category.
There's no limit. Yeah.
Yeah, precisely. And I just knew the music I wanted to make would never achieve that. And also the way I wanted to present myself and do things would never achieve that because I'm a very messy person. I'm messy. My branding has never been consistent. Like I change all the time. I'm not willing to just like stick myself in the mud and just like keep doing the same thing all the time. And I guess that's why I moved on. And I also I think the most freeing thing to me was just having that realization that labels are there to throw a bunch of money at a project and hope that it blows the fuck up. But they know that 99% of the time that's not going to happen. They're just taking a risk and a chance every single time on the off chance that one time it really pays off and covers all of the other risks that they're taking. And like the chance, the percentage chance that you're going to be one of those people is so fucking low. It's like a 1% chance, if not less than that, you know? And like, I just knew, I was like, there's no fucking way I ended up being the Taylor Swift or the Chapel Rowan or whatever, you know? Like, I think also because I'm too like anti-establishment. I think the problem is like, I've probably pissed people off because I've said no, or I've said, I think this thing is bad, but that thing has a lot of power and sway and all that stuff. Even me opposing like what's happening in Gaza, like there are so many Zionists in power in the music industry who have like the power to blacklist me in some way, right? Like it actually, I know it happens. Like I've heard about it. And so just that stuff, right? Like someone like me can never actually be really famous or at least not for, I honestly think it requires unless it is like an accidental rise like Chaperones was, because she clearly has like philosophy and morals and values. But there is no way to, I think, get really famous without being a bit of a bootlicker. And I'm not a bootlicker. Like, I'm so sorry to all those people who I know like are really famous and are really successful and have that. But that, like, how many of them can say they actually ever stuck their neck out for a cause that they really cared about? That was a bit controversial because it actually spoke to power, you know. Like, and I won't. Like, I actually can't live my life not saying things like that. And you know, that's probably a product of my upbringing as well, because there were so many things that happened to me when I was a kid that, like, if I hadn't been as resistant as I was, I would be totally fucked up. Like, literally, I don't know why there's a fighter spirit inside me, but, like, it is the greatest gift that, you know, quote unquote, God ever gave me, because without it, I would be fucking dead right now. And, like, yeah, and I just actually can't, like, turn a blind eye to all that stuff.
Well, don't take this the wrong way, but if there's anyone who I would like that I would like to see be blown up, and I mean like blown up to stardom.
Yeah, right.
May it be Montaigne, you know, so that you can
Appreciate
so that you can get up there and then say some really amazing shit that gets that flames you out almost instantly.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
that makes a difference. Like, I'd be so there for that. Like,
yeah.
Let's all pump up Montaigne so that then they can say what they really think. Yes.
Okay.
This has been so good. Thank you for being so, for like sharing and being so vulnerable and open, and I appreciate
no
it.
worries.
Yeah. Just so that I can have like one thing in the podcast that isn't as heavy as the rest.
Yeah, yeah.
And because I just am curious, what are you playing at the moment? What are you excited about in the games world? What's your obsession at the moment?
I just literally yesterday started playing Metaphor Refantasio, which is the new like Atlas games game.
Yeah, Persona.
Persona people
studio.
who made Persona and Shin Megami Tensei and all that stuff. It's so good. Like, I think I've probably played like 5 hours or something like that, and immediately I'm so hooked. Like, I really love Persona 5, and this one is just as good, if not better. Like, it goes so hard. The art style is amazing. The music is amazing. I'm really enjoying the writing and the world so far. The battle's awesome. The monsters look fucking crazy. And they're called humans for some reason, which is a cool mystery. Like, the monsters are called humans, and then the rest of the humanoid sort of like races in the world are all called different things, and they all have sort of semi-animal features as well. Anyway,
maybe it's a
really
metaphor.
Cool. Yeah, it's almost like it's a metaphor. It is a bit on the nose sometimes, the writing, but I like it. I like it. I think they get away with it because everything else goes so hard. Like, it's just, it pulls no punches. I love it. So that's like kind of my new obsession. But I also have been playing a lot of Peglin, which is like a game you can get, I think, on every console, and it's just like a roguelike where you're a little goblin who plays Peggle and you get power-ups and stuff. It's really cool. And I've also been trying to churn my way through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which started off really great, and now I'm just like, man, when's this going to end? Like, fuck me. It's just taking too long. There are too many mini games that like are not optional to play. So that's my cluster of games right now. I feel like I'm also always playing Minecraft because I do that with like community on Twitch every second Tuesday night. So that's my suite of games right now.
Nice. I'm playing Balatro, which is the...
Still haven't played it. Yeah.
Make sure you've got time in your life for it before you start.
I'm worried to start playing it because I just know I'm not like a casual chill gamer. Like, if I get into a game I really like, it's like that's my life gone.
Yeah.
Like, for like 1 week, or depending on how long the game is, that is like a week of my life that I'm shirking responsibilities. It is taking everything because I have deadlines. I'm not playing Metaphor Refantasio right now. Like, because I have to put out this podcast tomorrow. I'm like, and I have to edit it. I'm not playing it, but boy, do I want to play it really badly. So that's why I'm scared to pick up Balatro, because I put like 450 hours into Slay the Spire or some shit, like over 8 months or something.
Yeah, I've just done a couple of 100 hours in Balatro.
Yeah, nice.
It's like in the last 6 weeks or something.
Yeah.
And when I look at that, I'm just like, wow, I really did quit my job. You know what I mean? Like where else would where like I could not have had that 200 hours any other time in my life. But,
Exactly.
I love that you and I are about to both go and edit podcasts this afternoon. I love that. Welcome to the life of an independent musician.
Podcast guys. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, no, but it is fun to be a musician who likes to talk, though. Like it is funny because like a lot of them don't want to talk about their lives and what they think and stuff like that. A lot of them are just like, I'll just do the music. Like I don't need any more. But like it is really fun to be a creative person who likes to talk about it. I feel like that's my feeling. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Well, anyone listening to this who isn't already listening to Tank Time with Montaigne, they should totally be doing that, and just wait for that bump from my listeners.
Hell yeah.
It's going to be huge. You'll notice it.
Fantastic.
It's a huge bump.
I'm waiting with bated breath.
All right. Well, I'll see you again sometime.
Yes, that's good.